Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Carpo's Corner. This particular podcast is going to pertain to creativity. What sets creative people apart from others? Or is everyone creative inherently? Is it something that we have genetically programmed within us to want to create and invent? I guess that's a question for another time. This video, or audio, is mainly going to deal with my experience as a creative person and some of the tools and, I guess, some of the things that I've learned about being a creative person that have helped me to lead a more confident life in the meantime while everything races around me. The average creative person feels like they're trapped in a world of go, 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 progress, production, get things done, get a job, retire. Basically the live and die attitude isn't the way that we think. And what I wanted to address, somebody mentioned, I made a couple videos yesterday, one about photography and one about playing guitar. My idea is just to inspire people who want to pick these things up, but maybe don't feel like they can or have the inspiration. See, creativity is a muscle. You have to exercise it. You don't wait for inspiration. You just have to do it. And I hate to use the just do it line, but this is my personal experience and something that I have, to be honest, I'm almost guilty of being ignorant of this for so long. It's only in recent months that I've really started to come to terms with this fact that you cannot wait for inspiration. You have to get up and start. And I've heard this so many times, but I've used that excuse. Somebody will want to play guitar, and I'll be like, well, I haven't played guitar in a while. I have to be inspired. Or, I want to draw a picture, but I have to be inspired. Sometimes all it takes is just thinking about it to be inspired. But you really have to put in the muscle and the action, too. Brains differ in creative people. And this is something that I did want to address. They've found that the hippocampus is different. I guess it's larger in people who tend to be more creative or artists. And understanding neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to change according to what you expose yourself to. Just like if a person goes blind, their other senses, those areas of their brain, their olfactory, will become larger and take over the role of vision. Well, if you're not using your creativity, then perhaps your rational mind will take over. And that's one of the big questions. I mean, living in a rational mindset is important, but it can sometimes directly conflict with being creative. One interesting article I read said that brains differ in creative people. The children, on however they assess this, a creativity assessment, that something like 80% of kids between 5 and 7, or maybe it was 3 and 6, basically, kindergarten through second grade, were considered creative geniuses. And when they got to the ages of 8 to 11, that dropped down to 53%. And by the time they were in high school, it was down in the, single digits. And the idea is that the way that the public education system works, it's designed to, in a way, force creativity out of you, to make you an obedient worker. And I'm not saying that in some conspiracy sense. The founder, I don't recall his name, of the American education system said that. It was to create people who were basically cookie cutters, who could get up and do the work. During the Industrial Revolution, we just wanted people who could do the jobs. So, we're discouraged also by this starving artist illusion, this idea that there should be a guilt there. That I have this guilt inside when I'm doing something creative, that I should be working. I should be working to make money or do something else. But there's a part of me that says, this creativity will pay off eventually. And then there's another part of me that says, oh God, you're just hoping it'll pay off eventually. And then another part of me asks, well, what is a payoff? And for me, to be honest, it's not about money. It's just about being able to live, pay my bills, feed my family, and be able to create whatever I decide to create. And I've always put myself down as an artist, as if, well, I'm not really an artist. I'm a creative person, but, I just once in a while get inspired to do something. That's not it at all. I wake up every single day and want to create something. And I've realized that I've really overlooked my YouTube channel as being creative. And it's funny because in the YouTube channel, the definition is creator, right? But since I just sit in front of the camera and generally talk, I've never thought of it as creating. I just say, well, it's me talking. And I haven't given myself that credit to realize that it's how I'm expressing that angst, that part of myself that needs to express. If I'm not creating one thing, I'm creating another. So it's almost like you can't help, it wields itself, you know? And so I'm trying to get over that. I'm trying to say, well, it'll work out. Just follow your heart and do what you do. But we also know that that doesn't always work for people. The thing about creative people that I've noticed in my life is they always feel like outcasts. I know this personally. They're always the back of the bus kind of person. And unique, different, individual, kind of quirky. Not always, though. You know, creativity comes in many forms, but you'll see these repeating patterns. And as I was saying, you know, you feel like you're not working. You're not always productive, but you're always thinking. And sometimes these ideas take years to come to fruition. I mean, I was writing a book about a year and a half ago, and I got halfway through it. And, well, I'm actually pretty much done. It was about opioids and the pharmaceutical industry. And then I just said, well, put it on the shelf and didn't finish it. And this is the biggest problem. People lose hope because they can't finish the projects they start. And that's okay. Sometimes you might have to come back to it. Mainly because it takes a while for us to experience enough life to really understand what stories are worth telling. That's in my opinion and my experience, that it's kind of like the young guru, for example, you know, who hasn't experienced life yet. You're not going to listen to a 16-year-old tell you what life's all about when you're 50. I mean, they might have some good points, but there's always going to be this thing in your back of your mind that says, you'll see, because their mind is still changing. All of our minds are constantly changing. So I think that the world needs art, and that we thrive on creativity. And it's believed that it's part of our genetics. There seems to be this inherent drive to create, which is, as I said, not everybody seems to be creative, but really a lot of people are just suppressing that feeling and maybe diminishing the value of what they do create. It might not be anything big. It could be somebody who makes, you know, sculptures out of toothpicks, which actually there's a guy who does that. And now I've seen his YouTube video where he did this whole aircraft carrier in toothpicks. It's just crazy. It's his little hobby. It's his creative outlet. And eventually he got noticed. But that might have taken many, many years to come to fruition. But so what is creativity worth? Well, it helps us for problem solving in life, and that's why creative people are good to have in the workforce, because they can think outside the box, you know, and it generally makes people happier. It might not make everyone happier to create, but for those who are creative, if you suppress that, it's going to bite you in the ass. I mean, there's no way around it. You cannot suppress that feeling of needing to invent and create if that's what you do. And one thing I've noticed is that we're also very sensitive to the environment and learn how to observe in ways different than others. And I've noticed this personally because of every different art form or hobby I've taken on. As soon as I do, I start to see things differently in the world. Perhaps I'm seeing more shadows because I'm doing pencil work, or perhaps I'm seeing different layers in things, or I'm a musician and I'm hearing tunes and tones I never heard. I mentioned before, I actually play guitar better than I did when I was younger, even though I haven't practiced, because I've heard more music and I feel like I have more of a memory to draw on. So our life experience help us create too. And what are some of the characteristics of a person that you may have in your life who's creative that they might be just totally frustrating to deal with? Maybe they don't do things the way everyone else does. They can't stay organized. One of the characteristics that I was kind of surprised, because after reading a lot about creative people, I found I resonated with every single description. And one of the main ones was creative people are argumentative and love to play the devil's advocate. And I've heard this so many times from so many different sources that people say, you know, it's not about being right or just wanting to argue for the sake of arguing. And people mistake us for, they misinterpret the intentions as being argumentative for the sake of putting somebody else down or making some ad hominem attack. But then you find upon deeper inspection that that's only because the person who is on the receiving end interprets it that way. And it's not always put forth that way, but it's really hard to define that. We love to argue. I love to argue. Some of my subscribers, it probably drives them nuts when they make one simple comment about something and I argue it. It's, hey, I love you. It's not personal. I just like to argue points. When something doesn't feel right to me, I argue it. And that's part of the creative outlet. Taking criticism may be harder for creative people. Practicing stoicism is a really valuable trait for, those who are creative-minded. I mean, I can deal with the world. I can deal with criticism. I can deal with a lot of crap, but I'm still sensitive. There's a part of me that is sensitive. And it doesn't mean I can't take criticism. It's usually when a person is personally rude or harsh towards me in an ad hominem way. And of course I can let it go. I get over it quick. But there is a certain sensitivity. And one thing about you'll notice is people who are creative tend to have emotional fluctuations throughout the day. They can be elated one minute and completely bummed out the next. Not to the extreme of bipolar, but it kind of, it took me a while to realize this in myself. I was like, what's happening? As I get older especially, there's more mood swings and different opinions at different times of the day. And, you just learn to live with it. It's just something you learn to accept. And another thing is we have a very twisted or strange sense of humor. People might think we're callous or biased because of some of the jokes or things that we talk about with our friends, but the reasons are more about truth and learning about our dark side. And when I say dark side, I'm not talking about evil. People who understand the dark side know that you must embrace it. There's a part of yourself that nobody else can ever understand, and that it's very difficult for us to understand. But using this darkness is very inspiring when you want to create art. And you've seen it come through in a lot of different artists, like, what is it, H.R. Geiger, the guy that did the aliens, creepy-ass drawings, amazing artist, but there's a darkness there. Some people paint rainbows and unicorns, and some people will paint monsters and aliens, and both of them are an important part of our psyche, So there's a twisted sense of humor, but here's one thing, of course, curious people. I mean, I'm curious about everything. I want to learn everything. And there's kind of a crazy zaniness that goes along with that, Substance abuse or use, anyway, is very common. A lot of artists and, writers and whatnot tend to drink at times or smoke a lot of weed or whatever it might be for them, their drug of choice, but it's not always to the point of self-detriment. There's like this little spark that's lit sometimes, and, I understand that because inspiration sometimes can come with use of substances. But, I've always heard that a cluttered desk or a cluttered room means a cluttered mind. And it was interesting because I read this research that was this study that was done where people were given a ping pong ball at their desk and told to do something with it, use it for something. I don't recall the details of the test, but they found time and time again that the people with the more cluttered desks tended to have more creative ideas. So the theory goes like this. One person put it well by saying, well, if a cluttered desk is a cluttered mind, then what is an empty desk? So it's not about having empty soda cans and moldy peels everywhere. We're talking about if you have the kind of room where you have stacks of papers and books and hobbies and paintbrushes and all this just stacked up out in your garage or your office like I do, and you think, man, I should really clean up my act. Remember that they've found that this is actually kind of a subconscious inspirational thing. When you have all this stuff around you, you'll pick something up and you'll go with it. It's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that you're not creative or you're not, we become obsessive about being clean, and that's often not the problem. It's cleaning our minds that is the hard part. And so one other aspect of creative people is we tend to limit access to our emotions, and I know this personally. And often this is because of something that happened to us in our youth. I mean, for me, I don't know. It could have been a multitude of things. Probably my father passing when I was young. But we tend to withdraw, but also be very social. It's what you would call an introvert extrovert. We don't fit one point or the other. It's sometimes you want to be with a group of people and just play guitar and have a great time. And the next minute you just want to go back and hide in the corner and sit in silence. And the older I get, the more I respect and understand that part of myself and don't feel guilty about withdrawing for a while, because we need it sometimes. But also we have to limit access to our emotions. And some people may think we're cold or crude, but really it's setting boundaries. And you have to set boundaries with people, or else they'll drive you insane. You'll drive each other insane. So you might seem cold or crude, but it's actually the opposite is true. It's because you have so much attachment to people and life in general that you feel your heartstrings pulled when somebody wants to hang out and you can't hang out. Or, maybe, I don't know, somebody calls and you don't answer. I never answer my phone, but it's not because I don't love. It's because I get calls from all kinds of random spam numbers. I just stopped answering my phone. But sometimes I don't even answer texts. I don't even pick up my phone for a whole day. I just want to live in my own little reality. And that's hard to do in a world where you have to function and work and discuss things with people. So one other aspect is I hate dishonesty and liars, and I'll call out bullshit whenever I see it in any form. But also creative people have our own delusions and our own illusions and stand by them, even if we know they're likely false. And this is an interesting paradox, because on one hand, I'll call out anything that sounds BS. I'll say, where's the facts? Where's the facts? From anybody. Doesn't matter who you are. If you say something I don't believe is true, I'm going to say, show me. But there are certain things that I believe, such as the universe being conscious, that I can only know through feeling and not through words. So you give up trying to express it. Those are the things where I stubbornly say, I know what I believe, and I don't need your opinion on beliefs or religions, which is maybe why I come across cold sometimes when people tell me they want to save me with the Lord or something, and I just jump down their throat. I'm like, look, I don't do that to you. I say, good for you. You believe what you believe. Don't need to hear it. And that's another aspect here is creative people don't take ourselves too seriously. But sometimes you can be very serious. But you realize everything's kind of a joke. And it's a form of nihilism in a way, I guess. But life really shouldn't be taken too seriously, and neither should we as individuals. But we love cynicism and sarcasm. And I've had this discussion with people before. I've heard people say that sarcasm is the sign of a weak mind or a bad argument, and that's all complete nonsense. Sarcasm and cynicism are a way of really calling out the truth, calling out reality for what it should be, saying, no, there's a little bit of bullshit to this, but that's just something a lot of people don't like. So there's guilt of not being productive. Some results can take years to achieve, and patience is not our strong point. Sometimes we have to set aside our work and think about it for a long time. And some creations require life experience. So a lot of people just want to be original, so they try to come up with some original idea, which is great, except for originality comes naturally after imitating those that we admire. Nothing is truly original. If you pick up a pencil and you draw on paper, you're doing what other people have done. You're using styles that have been done, and that's okay. You grow into your own. But sometimes you have to have a lot of patience and careful observation over a period of time in order to be able to create the things that you want. And it can be frustrating when you're not skilled enough to do what you want. But it's even more frustrating, which is the problem that most people have that are creative, is that they have to work a normal job. They don't have the time for their art. They have to come home, feed the kids, wash the clothes, do all those normal things. And you'd think, well, if I just had extra time, I'd do more stuff. But I'm just going to say it's not necessarily true. Even in the times when I've had lots of extra time, inspiration, it comes in waves, and you do have to force it, as I said, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes you just pick up a guitar and draw a blank, or you grab a piece of paper and don't draw a blank because it's already blank, whatever your art form might be. The thing is just to do it. And when it becomes a job, this is one last aspect on it. If you turn your hobbies and your passions into a job, it's phenomenal. But you have to remember, then you have to get up and do a specific thing. If you're an artist that's drawing a certain type of comic, you can't get up and just say, I want to do this instead. If you're a musician that has to play a gig, you can't just write new songs for a different album when you need to focus on that one. And it becomes hard for people because their creativity becomes their job. And once it becomes a job, I don't know, that's a difficult line. So what it comes down to is, for the average creative artist, whatever you want to call people, we don't really care about money. I don't care about money, and most artists I've met don't give a shit. We just want to be able to feed our families. But we're also told to trust in nature to reward us for our efforts. And I would say that that's true. In other words, just let things work their way out. People would call it maybe karma, they'd call it just chance, fate, whatever it might be. But that depends on where you live and who you know. Artists that are born in wealth will definitely differ in their circumstance than those that are born in poverty. In other words, they'll have access to every single tool that they want. Somebody who's broke, says, well, I want to do this. And they're like, okay, well, you've got to have all these materials. You got to buy paintbrushes and palettes, and they can't afford it. And so they're using half-assed materials, but the person who has the means can buy anything they want. Doesn't mean they're more inspired. It doesn't necessarily even mean they're luckier. It's just an observation that trusting in nature to provide, it depends on the resources and availability that you have. But ultimately, you have to trust in yourself and your potential and grow your talents. Inspiration does not appear as we'd like it to. We just have to take the reins and dive in. And what's really important is that we're happier in life. At least that's my opinion. And I think that the thing that matters the most is that we follow our hearts. And that is sometimes the hardest thing to do, because life doesn't always give us the option to just follow our hearts. We have obligations, and fighting and balancing the obligations and our dreams are one of the most difficult things we can do in our lives. Becoming who we want to be. It takes a lot of work, and sometimes the payoff can take years to achieve, and sometimes there is no payoff. But you have to remember, the payoff is in the work, and it should always be in the work. It should never be about making money. If you set out to create things just to make money, then you will lose your passion and you will eventually burn out. If you do it for the right reasons, then you'll meet good people. And hopefully along the way you'll make some good decisions and maybe get lucky. That's pretty much what life is, Life is a creative endeavor of which road to take and how to get there. So thanks for listening, and I appreciate your ears for a moment while I talk about this. And I took quite a few notes because it was something that was really on my mind. I realized if I was unobservant about so many of these aspects of myself, and I'm a very self-observant person, but the one I've wrestled with the most, to kind of sum it up, is justifying my own art forms as what I choose to do. I wouldn't consider, I guess you could call, making videos creativity in a way. It's like, but the creative process varies between each person. It doesn't really matter to me which way I express myself as long as I'm doing something. And getting your feedback, I really appreciate that. My ability to have this outlet where I can share it with all of you and get your feedback is priceless. It really is, and I don't overlook that. So take care now. I'll talk to you next time, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo. Yeah.